me down being here. As Deacon Lee mentioned about the Sunday school lesson, before he said his mind went to that, my mind had just gone before it, maybe a minute prior when Jesse went to play her cello. We were singing number 36, and Lexi's 5 and Haley's 3. So Lexi's really starting to enjoy when she can do things on her own, like find numbers in a book. Haley's 3, and she can't do that yet, but she still does. So anyway, so Lexi had found the number in the book, and I looked over and Haley's flipping around and said, Haley, is it the Old Testament or New Testament? So people are always watching, regardless of what your relationship is, whether it's siblings, parents, whoever God has entrusted you with to make a positive impact in their life, somebody is always following. You might have already sensed the theme from the music this morning, where all the songs about storms. The message today is going to be about the storms of life, the different types of difficulties and challenges that we face while we're here in our time on earth. So if we will, let's turn over to our title verse will be in John chapter 16, and verse 33. John 16, 33. Now, I'm not going to read the end of the verse. We'll come back to it later. I'm going to start with just the first part of the verse. John 16, 33 says, These things I have spoken unto you, that in me ye might have peace. In the world ye shall have tribulation. Okay, let's open with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Just this beautiful word today in your house. We open your word and speak to us, Lord. I pray that you will speak through me today. I pray that I will not quench the spirit, that your word will go forward. Lord, I pray that we'll all leave here today closer to you from our time spent in your word, in your house, and on your people. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. It says at the end of the verse there, John 16:33, it says, In the world ye shall have tribulation. Okay, that's a definitive statement. It doesn't say, in the world you may have some trouble. You might have some problems. He's making it clear to us, if you walk along this road in the earth, you are going to have some problems. You're going to run into what we're going to call storms. You are going to run into some storms in life. Now, this part of the country, this part of the area, we're kind of used to storms. Like we've become acclimated with rainstorms, windstorms, snowstorms. Where we live close to Buffalo, there's something I call the Cheerio storm, because we go over Route 5 in the city of Buffalo, the wind blows and General Mills factory right on the water. And the whole city smells like Cheerios for days. But the point is, we expect storms from the weather. We expect storms climate-wise. We expect that living in this part of the world. It's just as natural for us to go through other types of storms in our lives as well. Now, even though we're used to storms, that doesn't mean that we enjoy them. I've never really seen anybody that's outside shoveling 4 feet of snow that just looks like they're having the time of their life. But we endure storms. We endure hardships. It's part of life. But sometimes I think the energy that we spend thinking about and the time that we spend oftentimes complaining about the different challenges and different trials that we're going through can really take our attention away from what God might be really trying to teach us through those particular storms in our lives. So we're going to start with the first part here is on your outline. If you have one, just have some outlines back there. One thing just to make sure is that the first point is the precipitation is different. So the first blank on our outline should be the precipitation is different. And what I mean by that is that the storms in life, the trials that we face, are going to be different from other people's trials. Right now, I've got 3 young children. I'm in my mid-30s. The challenges and trials I go through might be different than those of you that have teenage children, adult children, or even grandchildren. The trials I face now in my early mid-30s are different than those going through their teen years, their 20s. Those of you here that are in your 30s or 40s, or I don't see anybody older than 40 here, so we might have some of the same challenges. But what I mean by that is, sometimes from just the matter perspective, it's important to take a step back and realize that everybody is going through something, some storm in their life, even if it is completely different than what we ourselves are going through at that moment. It doesn't mean that my storms are more important or your storms are more important. It just means we're different. The precipitation is different. The storms of life that we're going through are different. Now, some of the storms that we go through in our lives, these ones are not on the outline, so don't start filling it in yet. A few of the different storms that most of us, if not all of us, have gone through or will go through in our own lives, one of them is family storms. Okay, at some point, most of us go through some type of trials with our family. And these, well, we're going to look at just a few examples here from the Bible. And they're very well-known stories and passages, so I won't turn there. But we'll just kind of talk about them from a reference point. Now, when we talk about Joseph, okay, Joseph had some family storms. He thought he had challenges that the other siblings did not have. He had dreams and visions from God that ultimately made his brothers very jealous of him, so much so that they sold him into slavery. And if you know the rest of the story, I'm willing to guess that the crowd decides there's probably somebody here that may have a strained relationship with a brother or sister, truly by something that is not your fault. Okay? This was not Joseph's fault, how his brothers reacted to him. Joseph did not ask God to give him visions and dreams. I joke with my brother and sister sometimes when I'm in the presence of my parents that I can relate to Joseph because I didn't ask to be my dad's favorite kid either. That typically doesn't go over very well. But Joseph didn't ask to be his father's favorite son. He didn't ask God to give him dreams or the ability to interpret them. Okay. So sometimes we have no control over the storms that are in our families. Okay. We don't conscientiously try to rock the boat. Sometimes it just happens. I heard recently of a family that I work with in Buffalo. The parent, those of you, I think most of you know I do speech therapy for my job, so a parent had canceled the last session. So when I came in last time, just asked how everything was going, if everything was okay, because it was a family that's usually pretty consistent. And I asked what had happened, and she said that her aunt had passed away. I said, well, I'm sorry to hear that. And she went into a long tale about her cousins, who were her aunts. She had 3 daughters at the time, that were always really close. Now that the will has been read and everything like that, they don't even speak to each other. And through really no fault of hers, now she has a strained relationship with her cousins based on that. It's unfortunate, but we see these things that happen in families. Another family trial, or example of a family storm, is Abraham and Isaac. And you might be thinking, well, what do you mean? They seem to have a pretty good relationship. But you got to remember that Abraham tried to sacrifice Isaac. And I know he was just kind of doing what God told him to do, but just being transparent, if my dad threw a knife on me, it probably caused some resentment there at some point. On a lighter note, I just had here in my notes that I imagine Thanksgiving dinner got really interesting around Abraham's house now. Imagine Isaac getting real nervous when Abraham gets the knife out the carpenter. But another one that we think about here is the prodigal son's father. That one's obviously very self-explanatory. If you've ever been a part of or even seen from a distance the pain and the hurt of a father or mother who are dealing with the heartache of a wayward child, it causes pain not only in that relationship, but it can really resonate to really everybody in the family that is dealing with that. So we see here that family storms are part of life that unfortunately we go through. Some of the other storms we go through are health storms. We know that Paul had an unknown health issue that most people believe was related to his eyes or his eyesight. Job had all sorts of ailments, including boils from his head to his toe. Asa was diseased in his feet, and we think of others. We think of Naaman, who was a leper, and other lepers. So we see that even in Bible times, physical trials were one of the storms that people had to deal with. Some of the other ones that came up when I was looking through the most common spiritual storms that Christians deal with, the one that came up higher on the list than I had anticipated was financial storms. There's a financial strain that tends to affect some people at some point in their lives. And these are just a few of the things. If we were going to get up here with a blackboard, we could probably come up with a much more comprehensive list. But these are just a few of the challenges and storms that we face as well. If you go into spiritual, emotional, relational difficulties, all those types of storms, unfortunately, even as Christians, even if we're doing everything, if I can say right, through no fault of our own, we can still have issues in these areas, these types of storms. Now we're going to make a shift, and this will be the first outline under God uses different storms. First point under there is God uses different storms. So we're going to look at a few of the actual literal storms that God used in the Bible. Okay? The first one there, letter A, is hailstorms. Hailstorms. Exodus chapter 9, verses 23 to 24. Says, and Moses stretched forth his rod toward heaven, and the Lord sent thunder and hail, and the fire ran along the ground, and the Lord rained hail upon the land of Egypt. So there was hail and fire mingled with the hail, very grievous, such as there was none like it in all the land of Egypt, since it became a nation. As we see here that God used storms. God used, in this instance, he used a hailstorm. Then letter B, we're going to look here that God used wind storms. Letter B is a wind storm. Wind. Windstorm. In Luke chapter 8, verse 23, it says, but as they sailed, he fell asleep, and there came down a storm of wind on the lake, and they were filled with water and were in jeopardy. Some other examples of windstorms are in Mark 4:37. And there arose a great storm of wind, and the waves beat into the ship, so that it was now full. Acts 27:15 is another example of a windstorm. Acts 27:15 says, and when the ship was caught and could not bear up into the wind, we let it drive. As we see here, just as we deal with windstorms, hailstorms, snowstorms, we see that in Bible times, they dealt with storms too. Okay, one of the other storms, we won't turn there, letter C is rainstorms. Again, the reference area in Genesis chapter 7, that goes along with Noah and the flood. Okay, we see that God obviously used rainstorms. And then letter D is thunderstorms. In 1 Samuel chapter 7, verse 10. Talks about thunderstorms. I'll turn it real quick. First Samuel chapter 7, verse 10 says, and Samuel was offering up a burnt offering, and the Philistines drew near to battle against Israel. But the Lord thundered with a great thunder on that day upon the Philistines. They discomfited them, and they were smitten before Israel. Okay, so what we see here, in point number 1, the precipitation is different. Okay, there are different types of storms, different challenges that all of us are going to face. But we're looking at point number 2, not only is the precipitation different, but number 2 is the motivation is different. The motivation is different. What I mean by that is the reason that God allows or uses storms in our lives is not going to be the same for every person. John chapter 9. If you want to turn there, we'll be there for just a minute. John chapter 9, just going to be the first 3 verses. And then for the rest of them, I'll just read the verses. I won't have to turn to all the text. There's a lot of examples on there. In John chapter 9, we're going to look at the first motivation that God uses, allows storms into our lives. John chapter 9, verse 1 says, and as Jesus passed by, he saw a man who was blind from his birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, neither has this man sinned nor his parents, but that the works of God may be manifest in him. So first, for letter A, one of the reasons, one of the motivations that God allows trials and challenges into our life is to bring glory to God. To bring glory to God. Jesus answered, neither hath this man sinned nor his parents, but that the works of God may be made manifest in him. Some of the trials that you're going through right now that maybe don't seem to make sense could very well be because the reason that God is going to glorify himself ultimately through whatever you are dealing with. Letter B is to get things out of our lives. To get things out of our lives. Jonah 1:5 says, then the mariners were afraid and cried every man unto his God. He cast forth the wares that were in the ship into the sea to lighten it with them. In Acts chapter 27, verses 18 and 19, it says, and we being exceedingly tossed with a tempest, the next day they lightened the ship. And the third day we cast out with our hands the tackling of the ship. So we see here in both of these verses, in both in Jonah and in Acts, that when the storms came, one of the results that followed was people physically, literally taking things and throwing them off the boat, getting rid of some things. Sometimes I wonder if God allows storms or God brings storms into our lives because there are things that he wants us to get rid of. There are things that he wants us to take inventory of and say, you know what, I don't need this, it shouldn't be here, I need to get rid of this. And some of these things I have written down it could be attitude, ego, pride, it could be anything. Some sort of sin that God wants to purge from our lives. We see that the purpose for some of the storms that we face is simply to get some of these things out of our lives that shouldn't be there. Letter C, another motivation for the use of storms in our lives could be to test our faith and increase patience. To test our faith and increase our patience. James chapter 1, verses 2 and 3 says, my brethren, count it all joy when ye fall into diverse temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. Notice when here, this is pretty straightforward. Another reason God uses storms is simply to test our faith and to increase our patience. We talked about Job earlier and the unbelievable storms that he had in his life, physically, the things that he dealt with. He lost his health, he lost his cattle, he lost his livelihood, lost his finances, lost his children. Ultimately, his wife told him, why don't you just curse God and die? I mean, Job was dealing with about every type of storm you can imagine at this point. And sometimes we might also wonder why someone we know, or maybe why we ourselves are going through something, going through such a difficult time in our lives. And this could be a reason why. It could just be because God simply wants to increase our faith and our patience, to increase our dependence on Him. In letter D, over on the back side of the outline, letter D, another motivation for storms in our lives is to deliver His people. Okay, we see that God uses storms to deliver His people. In 1 Samuel chapter 7:10, as Samuel was offering the burnt offering, the Philistines drew near to battle against Israel. But God thundered with a great thunder on the sky. Okay, God sent a thunderstorm and discomfited them, and they were smitten before Israel. So God, you see the use of storms always not in a judgmental way, but sometimes God uses it to actually deliver His people. Looking at number 3, I'm going to make a little bit of a change here. So we saw the different reasons why God uses storms. And I want to look at number 3, the reclamation is different. Okay, we saw the precipitation is different, the motivation is different, and the reclamation is different. The reclamation is different. And what that means is the way that God chooses to save us or rescue us is different. We probably all know people who have had some sort of physical issue in their life, very similar to somebody else. One person reacts well to a certain treatment. The other person going through the same exact thing does not react the same way. Because we see the way that God chooses to save us or rescue us is different. And there's a lot of verses here, and I won't actually turn to these because I just want to make a point here of how many different times people are struggling with different storms in their life where God chooses to rescue or save them in different ways. In Mark chapter 8, verses 22 and 23 says, "And he comes to Bethsaida, and they bring him a blind man, and he sought him to touch him. He took the blind man by the hand and led him out of town, and when he spit on his eyes and put his hands on him, he asked if he saw all." Okay, so God, here Jesus comes across a blind man, and he spits on his eyes. Matthew chapter 9, verses 27 through 30 says, "And when Jesus departed thence, two blind men followed him, crying and saying, Thou son of David, have mercy on us. And when he was come to the house, the blind men came to him, and Jesus saith unto them, Believe ye that I am able to do this? They said unto him, Yea, Lord. Then he touched their eyes, saying, According to your faith, be it unto you." Mark chapter 7, verses 31 through 33, "And again, departing from the coast of Tyre and Sidon, he came into the Sea of Galilee through the midst of the coast of Decapolis. And they bring unto him one that was deaf, and had an impediment in his speech, and they beseech him to put his hand upon him. And he took him aside from the multitude, and put his fingers into his ears, and he spit, and touched his tongue." As we see here, Jesus has healed blind men and deaf men. Mark chapter 1, verse 40 and 41 talks about Jesus healing the leper. "And there came a leper to him, beseeching and kneeling down to him, and saying unto him, If thou wilt, thou canst make me clean. And Jesus, moved with compassion, put forth his hand, touched him, and saith unto him, I will, be thou clean." In 2 Kings chapter 5, verses 9 through 14, this is sort of another leper named Naaman. Naaman came with his horses and with his chariot and stood at the door of the house of Elisha. And Elisha sent a messenger unto him, saying, Go and wash in Jordan 7 times, and thy flesh shall come again to thee, and thou shalt be clean. And when he went down and dipped himself 7 times in Jordan, according to the saying of the man of God, and his flesh came again unto him white unto the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. Luke chapter 8, verse 43 says, "And a woman having issue of blood 12 years, which had spent all her living upon physicians, neither could be healed of any, came behind him and touched the border of his garment, and immediately her issue of blood stanched. And the woman saw that she was not hid. She came trembling and falling down before him. She declared unto him how, before all the people, for what cause she had touched him, and how she was healed immediately." Okay, so we saw here people going through different physical storms, different trials, different challenges. In each situation, God's salvation, his reclamation, the way that he saved them is different. Okay, the first blind man, he spit on his eyes and put his hands on him. The next two blind men, he simply touched their eyes. The deaf man that had a speech impediment, he put his fingers in his ears and touched his tongue. The first leper, Jesus touched him and just simply said, Be thou clean. And then with Naaman, a man with the same issue, the same physical form of leprosy came in, he was told to dip himself in the Jordan River 7 times. The woman with the issue of blood was healed by touching the border of his garment. Okay. So I think it's just worth noting that sometimes we might see someone going through the same trials as we are, and maybe God intervenes or rescues them, provides them in some way. And we might sit there and wonder, why didn't God do that to me? Why didn't he heal me like he is this person? And we might almost kind of resent or get to the point where, why isn't God providing me like he is for other people? But just because somebody's going through the same storm as we are, it doesn't necessarily mean that God is going to provide for us in the same exact way that he is for somebody else. Now, we'll have to ask you to turn, if you will, to this one in Acts chapter 27. We're going to look at starting verse 43. Acts chapter 27, verse 43. Acts chapter 27, verse 43 says, "But the centurion, willing to save Paul, kept them from their purpose, and commanded that they which could swim should cast themselves first into the sea and get to land. And the rest, some on boards and some on broken pieces of the ship, so that it came to pass that all escaped safe to land." Now, if you know the backstory about the first part of this chapter, Paul is going through a just massive storm right now. Just a huge storm called Euroclydon. And this is, whenever I come to this passage in my Bible, I always stop and think about it because I don't know if you probably all have good, fond memories of childhood if you grew up in a Christian home. And this is one for me for this verse, because growing up, there was two evangelists that came through every year for a week long with our meetings in my grandfather's church that I attended. And they always had a book table in the back where you could buy books and sermons and things like that. And there was a book, like a Christian fiction book called Euroclydon. It was based on this story. And I remember my mom had it, and they would always kind of be by her rocking chair with her glasses on. And so whenever I come across this passage of scripture, I always think about my mom. But if you look at these verses, if you look at verse 43, one thing that I find just completely interesting, fascinating actually, is this, that there are a lot of people on this ship. Okay, when we read the story, we're kind of focused on Paul. But there are, by all accounts, there are a lot of other people on this ship. And they're all involved in the same exact storm. This massive storm called Euroclydon, it's not only just affecting Paul, it's affecting countless other people that are endeavoring on this journey as well. But if we're going to look at it, they're all rescued in different ways. They're all rescued in different ways, even though they're involved in the same exact storm. If you look here at verse 43, it says, and they commanded that they which could swim should cast themselves first into the sea and get to the land. Verse 44, and the rest some on boards, some on broken pieces of the ship, and so it came to pass that they escaped all safe to land. It says that some were rescued, first of all, by swimming. Some literally jumped off the boat and were able to swim themselves to land. Some says that they were literally clinging to boards, broken pieces of the ship, just trusting and waiting for the tide to bring them ashore. Now, if you notice that there are different levels of energy being used there. I mentioned this, if there's a huge storm going on, the wind's blowing, you can imagine the waves. That there's people out there that are swimming. I don't think this is like a leisurely, like doing a few laps at the YMCA pool. Okay, these people are struggling there for survival to try to get there. Now, does that require a little bit more effort than just kind of holding onto a board and waiting for it to float into the shore? Yes, it does. But we see here that they both got saved in different ways. An important thing to take this is to remember that even if somebody's going through the same storm as you, and they just seem like, they're okay, they're just kind of floating along, they're going to get there, they're going to be fine, and you feel like, I've really got to fight this, I'm really struggling, I'm really having a hard time with this storm. I have to put so much energy, it's so much harder for me than it is for them. Okay, we all agree that it's easier to just float, but we've got to be careful to not look at what other people are going through and just wonder, why can't I just float like they are? Why isn't God providing for me in the same way? Why do they just kind of, why does it seem like somebody threw them a raft and they're just getting pulled in? I've got to really struggle and swim and do this on my own. How come God is answering their prayers and not mine? How come God is providing him with a job and I've been out of job for so long? Why is God repairing their relationship and not mine? And we don't always know the answers. But what we do know is, what we are really pointing to is the reclamation is different. God, in his wisdom, chooses to provide for us and to rescue us in different ways. If you still have your outline on number 4, we have here the conclusion isn't always smooth. The conclusion isn't always smooth. You're still there in Acts chapter 27. Starting in verse 39, it says, and when it was day, they knew not the land, but they discovered a certain creek with a shore, into the which they were minded, if it were possible, to thrust in the ship. And when they had taken up the anchors, they committed themselves into the sea, and loosed the rudder bands, and hoisted up the mainsail to the wind, and made toward shore. And falling into a place where two seas met, they ran the ship aground, and the forepart stuck fast and remained unmovable, but the hinder part was broken with the violence of the waves. Okay, so we see here that ultimately, those people that were on the ship, who are in the middle of the storm, they do escape the storm. Okay, they make it to land. But it wasn't a smooth landing. Okay, they didn't just peacefully kind of float up to the shore and dock the boat and get out and go along their merry way. That's not how it worked. It says here that the ship was basically crashed into land so hard that the front of the ship got stuck into the land. So that it remained unmovable, and the back of the ship was beaten with the violence of the waves and broken up. So it's important to realize that when we're going through our storms, God doesn't always bring us to our destination in a peaceful, gentle manner. Just because He brings us through difficult times doesn't mean it's going to be easy. But when we look at other people who have a kind of easier time going through these trials of life, it's important to realize that God still has a plan for us. And not to question why He's provided to other people in a different way than He is for us. Brings us to our final point, number 5. Number 5 is God's connection to the storm is still the same. God's connection to the storm is still the same. So we say the precipitation is different. The trials of life that we go through are going to be different. The motivation is different. God uses different trials for different purposes in our lives. The reclamation is different, how God chooses to save us. The conclusion isn't always smooth or easy. Sometimes we have quite a difficult time getting there. But God's connection to the storm is still the same. In Isaiah 25, verse 4, it says, a refuge from the storm. Psalm 107:29, it says, He maketh the storm a calm, so the waves thereof are still. Luke 8:24 says, He rebukes the wind and the raging of the water. Matthew 8:26, again, He rebuked the winds and called them, and brought calm. Mark 4:29, He rebuked the wind and brought calm. Psalm 91, verse 2 says, I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in Him will I trust. Now these are just a few of the verses that illustrate the point that God's connection to the storm. Now these are talking about like literal storms, rainstorms, thunderstorms, snowstorms, hailstorms, the ideas of God's connection to the storms in our lives. No matter what they be health, relationship, emotional, spiritual, financial, no matter what they are, God's connection to the storms that face our lives is still the same. That connection is that He is in control. Even when we're in the midst of the storm and our boat's kind of getting rocked side by side and the rain's beating down on us and the wind is kind of blowing us over, we don't feel like there's anybody in control sometimes. But God's connection to the storm is that He is still in control. He's still in control. The storms may be different. The reasons may be different. The way He rescues may be different. The ending might not be easy. But without a doubt, God is still in control. Now, if you'll turn with me back over to John chapter 16, we started with this verse. But you'll remember, we did not read the verse in its entirety to start with. John chapter 16, verse 33. These things I have spoken unto you, that in me you might have peace. In the world you shall have tribulation. Until we stop. Now we're going to finish the verse. But be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. It's guaranteed that we are going to have trials in life. It's a certainty. We're going to have some trials. We're going to go through some storms. But it's just as certain that Jesus Christ has overcome the world. We can have peace and confidence in that He is the one who's in control of even the storms we're facing in our lives. With that little word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your word. Lord, we thank you that we know that you're always in control of everything's going on in our lives. The different storms and different challenges we face. We thank you for that, Lord. Knowing that we don't have to weather the storms alone. We don't have to be self-sufficient or independent. We can depend on you. I pray that you'll help us, Father, to look to you for peace in the times of storms. And try to see, Lord, if there's things you're trying to teach us about, what the motivation might be for the different the different trials and challenges we do face while we're here on this earth. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Garrett. We're going to sing hymn number 281, and I'm going to ask our pianist to just play through that once for us, and then we'll sing verses 1, 2, and 3. Sing the first verse of 496, Victory in Jesus. 496, the first verse.